Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 78 based on novel. So let's start. With a clear roar, Xiao Yan, sitting in the void, his breath suddenly soared. In a short moment, the breath in Xiao Yang's body has become extremely terrible. After a few breaths, Xiao Yan closed his eyes and suddenly opened them. In a pair of dark and clear eyes, two gorgeous fire orns burst out in a short time. The fire was like an arrow through the clouds. It pierced the void and disappeared into the endless darkness. Xiao Yang's body suddenly shook and twisted. He stood up from the void, and his strength poured out. The void around his body was difficult to support under this terrible strength. After the severe distortion of the earthquake, he broke suddenly. Feeling the strength in his body several times stronger than that before January, Xiao Yan finally showed a slightly relaxed smile on his face. After so much fatigue, I finally broke through the 5-star and half emperor. The palm is lightly grasped, and the invisible strength gathers in the palm. Xiao Yan will not doubt it. As long as his palm is waved at will, the void in front of him will be torn up in an instant. No one can imagine that under this seemingly thin body, there should be such terrible destructive power hidden. Holding his hands tightly, Xiao Yang's body shook violently, his body twisted slightly, and then there was a clicking sound of bone collision all over his body, a long-lost sense of comfort, and the rest of the time slowly arose in Xiao Yang's heart. Hey, boy, your breakthrough this time is really not easy. The sound of Jiu-Yu's chuckle came faintly. Although he was dissatisfied with Xiao Yang's previous crazy move, no matter what, Xiao Yang's strength improvement at the moment is also real. At this time, the process is no longer important. When Xiao Yang heard the speech, he couldn't help feeling a lot. He nodded gently. Xiao Yang Chang exhaled and looked up at the thunder still floating in the void. However, he had no fear in his heart at the beginning. For a long time, Xiao Yang slowly took back his eyes, but at the same time, the corners of his lips also aroused a slight smile. The thought moved, and the terrible soul power in Xiao Yang's eyebrows spewed out quickly. It condensed on Xiao Yang's side and became an embodiment of strength that reached the peak of the late half-emperor of 3 stars. Oh, this time, take these cultivation resources together. With the sound of joking laughter falling, the incarnation body beside Xiao Yang suddenly shook, and his fierce eyes instantly raised and looked at the thunder. Then without hesitation, under the control of Xiao Yang's mind, he rushed into the hundreds of terrible thunder. Thorn la la. As the avatar rushed into the thunder group, the sound of thunder explosion came out, but Xiao Yang's face didn't show the slightest unexpected look. When the mind moved, the skills in the avatar began to work, and a terrible suction burst out at once, pulling the thunder around the body closer. With the operation of the skills in the avatar, the thunder was continuously absorbed and evolved into the body, quickly refined by it, and improving the strength of the avatar. The incarnation was put aside for the time being. Xiao Yang turned his eyes and looked at the North King at the moment. After a year and a half of thunder baptism, the Beiwang at the moment, a body of steel, is incomparably tough, and the dark color looks deep, just like a solid black hole. Before this strange darkness, I'm afraid even the sun will be swallowed up by it. When Xiao Yang came near, he saw all this clearly. When he was staring at Beiwang's body, he couldn't help being surprised. Even his mind and spirit would be trapped in this strange darkness. Good guy, the continuous swallowing of this year and a half has indeed improved your strength. Unexpectedly, even I almost lost your way. Feeling the strangeness of the North King, Xiao Yang couldn't help exclaiming. Then he noticed that the North King had stopped swallowing the power of thunder at the moment. At this time, although the North King still exudes that strange attraction in his body and attracts the force of thunder to his body, he can only surround the North King's body. Even if he touches the North King's body, he will only be forcibly bounced out by the force of thunder in his body and cannot be absorbed by it. Is this the limit of Beiwang? Seeing this scene, Xiao Yang couldn't help frowning. If so, the North King's help to Xiao Yang in the future will gradually disappear, which can be regarded as a great loss for Xiao Yang. You know, the noumenon of the North King is the Taishu ancient dragon family. Even that terrible race can only develop to such a degree after refining into a puppet. This is really a big loss for Xiao Yang, but then, Xiao Yang quickly found some clues. Although it seems that the North King in front of him can no longer swallow these thunder forces, if you carefully explore it, you can find that there is a thunder force in the North King's body that has not been completely swallowed, which is being swallowed by the North King at an extremely slow speed. But before these forces are completely swallowed, Beiwang is afraid that he can no longer swallow the thunder. In other words, it's not that Beiwang's strength has reached the limit, but he needs a period of time to digest the strength he has gained in the past year and a half. Boom. When Xiao Yang just put down the matter of the North King in his heart, a violent roar sounded fiercely in the empty thunder pool. Hearing the roar, Xiao Yang's face not only didn't become dignified, but showed a happy smile, because the roar came from the avatar. Oh, I didn't expect that the breakthrough of the avatar was so much faster than my ontology, but it's good. It saves me a lot of time. Xiao Yang smiled at the corners of his mouth and spread his fingers in the depths of his palm. Then the terrible suction in the palm surged out. With the fierce breaking wind, the avatar quickly broke through the air and appeared in front of Xiao Yang. Well, yes, this breath is indeed a 4-star-and-a-half emperor. The avatar breaks through 3 stars, enters the 4-star-and-a-half emperor, breaks through 2 stars, and is promoted to the 5-star-and-a-half emperor. The strength of the North King has also been greatly improved. I don't know what I would feel if Muhan goodbye. Summing up his harvest in the Void Thunder Pool in the past 2 years, Xiao Yang's mouth can't help but evoke a cold sneer and think of Muhan. He still remembers the cold killing intention on his face when Muhan shot him at that time. If you can, Xiao Yang will never mind letting Muhan die in his own hands. Oh, well, I've been here for 2 years. Now, it's time to go out. Taking back his mind, Xiao Yang turned around and took back the North King and his avatar. His body moved. The dragon of Xiao Jin's avatar followed closely behind him, and quickly flew away to the location of the Lei Kai channel in his memory. A moment later, Xiao Yang stood on a void with a frown, and felt a little trouble in his heart. As Jiu Li said, the Lei Kai channel will automatically close after half a year. Now he can't leave here. Looking at the huge thunder pillar in front of him with dignified eyes, Xiao Yang was helpless. In front of the thunder pillar, even his empty avenue was absolutely impossible to take him away from here. Alas, old bone, I'm afraid I'll trouble you this time. Xiao Yang finally put his hope on Guyo. After all, only Guyo has the means to subdue the thunder pillar in front of him. Jiu smiled and didn't show up, but joked in Xiao Yang's body. Hey, boy, don't ask me for these things. I won't help you in this minefield. If you ask, please ask the little guy next to you, ha. Jiu's words were not just addressed to Xiao Yang, so Xiao Jin beside Xiao Yang heard them really. Then he saw Xiao Yang's slightly surprised eyes. Even if he raised his huge head high, it seemed that he was waiting for Xiao Yang's plea. In this regard, Xiao Yang had no choice but to curl his mouth and cast a big white eye at Xiao Jin. Xiao Yang then curled his mouth and said, "All right, stop playing. I know you have this ability. I know you're powerful. All right, now is not the time to play. If you want to play, you have to wait until you go out." Hearing Xiao Yenue's urging words, Xiao Jin can only immediately lower his head, and then no longer procrastinate. His huge body slowly twisted. With a dragon mouth, he gave a low dragon chant to the thunder column in front of him, which is several times thicker than it. At the next moment, with a twist in the space, Lei Kai slowly emerged in front of Xiao Jin, and the active thunder also dispersed. With Xiao Jin here, they really didn't dare to make a second time as usual. Seeing this, Xiao Yang couldn't help but praise Xiao Jin. The latter also roared happily at once, and Xiao Yang also smiled. Then, he entered the thunder pool channel with Xiao Jin and flew away quickly. When the fresh morning light falls on the city, the silence of the night is broken again, followed by another day's noise. When the city wakes up from a short sleep, every corner of the whole continent is gradually bustling. In today's wild ancient city, the vast green mountains, at this moment, there are some people who are recovering from 2 years of sleep. Boom! Grey mountains, the thick thunder clouds over the otherwise silent grey mountains, suddenly churned violently. The thunder roared like a terrible beast roaring between heaven and earth. Below the thunder clouds is the unreachable Gulay Mountain, which is like the pillar of the Optimus. At this moment, in the terrible thunder, the people at the foot of the Thunder Mountain can't help feeling a terrible threat. All those below the half-emperor can't bear to kneel down, and their arms are hard to support their bodies that want to be overwhelmed, and their hearts are even more shocked. This thundercloud, which has just been silent for 2 years, how can it churn violently at this moment? Can it be said that the void minefield will open again? But the thunder pool has only been closed for 2 years. How can it be opened again so soon? What happened? Countless people's hearts are filled with horror, but also shrouded in deep incomprehension. They really can't figure out why the void minefield, which has only been closed for 2 years, suddenly opens 2 years later. When several semi-imperial strongmen in the crowd looked up dignified, The thunder clouds in the distant sky also gradually dispersed in a burst of violent thunder, and the thunder pool channel slowly opened. It's the mine pit channel. The void mine pit is really open again. Seeing the opening of the thunder pool, a crowd below boils for a while, and the empty thunder pool opens again. Once the news comes out, I'm afraid the whole wild ancient city and the surrounding large states will be shocked by it. Look. There seems to be something in the mine pit channel. Huh? What? As a cry of surprise came out, people looked again, and then they couldn't help but coagulate slightly. Sure enough, there was a black spot and a huge golden lightning slowly flying out of the thunderpool channel. When the black spot gets closer and closer, after walking out of the minefield channel, the people can roughly see that the black spot seems to be a human shadow. It looks like a human being, but what's behind him? The voice of the people's surprised words fell, and the golden lightning also flashed, turned into a golden light, and disappeared into the figure in front of them. My God! The void minefield has been closed. How can there still be human beings in it? Moreover, how did he come out? The void minefield can't be opened by manpower. No. Everything is not absolute. As long as you have enough strength, it's not difficult to open the void minefield. Does it mean that this man is a fighting emperor? Wow dash. The words full of horror immediately spread, and all the people in the field changed their faces. Only those semi-imperialist strong men were still looking up at the dark shadow in the sky. With their strength, they can naturally perceive that the one above the sky is not a strong man fighting the emperor, but a semi-emperor. However, what makes them dignified is that the several semi-emperor strong men present can't find out the real strength of the figure above the sky. In this case, either the other party has a treasure to cover up the breath, or the real strength is much higher than them. Among the strong semi-emperors present, there was no lack of 3-star and 4-star semi-emperors, but Rao was so. The breath of the semi-emperor above the sky still seemed very ethereal to them. While the people at the foot of Mount Gri kept guessing, Xiao Yang under the thunder cloud deeply breathed a few mouthfuls of fresh air between heaven and earth and felt the comfort spread in his body. The corners of Xiao Yang's mouth rose and showed a relaxed smile. After 2 years of hard cultivation, he finally came out of this empty minefield today. 2 years ago, he escaped into the depths of the void minefield in the most embarrassed state. Now he returns, but his strength has improved by leaps and bounds. This great contrast is really sad. Ha, I don't know. If I see Mu Han again, what kind of wonderful expression will appear on his face? Thinking of Mu Han, Xiao Yang couldn't help laughing in a low voice. A little cold awe appeared in his eyes, which reduced the temperature in the surrounding void. He shook his head lightly. Xiao Yang put aside his thoughts in his head for the time being, and slowly lowered his body. He glanced at him at random, but his eyes turned aside and noticed the towering Mount Gri behind him like a pillar of the sky. And when Xiao Yang's eyes quickly swept over the Mount Gri engraved by the authority of the strong emperor, after 3 vigorous and powerful characters, his eyes suddenly coagulated and his face looked slightly stunned. Xiao Yang remembered what Red Phosphorus said to him 2 years ago. At the beginning, Mu Han, after the soul power had just broken through the realm of unity and condensed the soul beads, also sat in front of the Gulay Mountain and fought against the Emperor's authority on the 3 giant characters of Gulay Mountain with the soul power for half a day. Although this period of time seems to be very short, it is very good for the semi-emperor to resist the pressure left by a real emperor fighting strong man. At least, for most people, they may not even have the courage. Recalling what Red Phosphorus said at the beginning, Xiao Yang couldn't help moving in his heart at the moment. Since Mu Han had insisted for half a day under the authority of the fighting emperor, I don't know how long he could have insisted if he had been him. With curiosity in his heart, Xiao Yang landed on the mountain where Mu Han had stood before, his eyes slowly raised, and his dark eyes looked at the 3 big words on the mountain wall. Buzzing. As soon as Xiao Yang's eyes came into contact with the 3 big characters of the mountain, the terrible pressure on it suddenly rushed towards Xiao Yang like a hungry tiger. Fortunately, Xiao Yang avoided it in time and didn't collide with it. When Shan took back his eyes, Xiao Yang couldn't help feeling a thrill in his heart. The pressure on these 3 big words was really terrible. Fortunately, now his soul power has broken through the shackles. Otherwise, it's really difficult to compete with it. After several breaths, the corners of Xiao Yang's mouth slowly stirred up a smile full of interest, narrowed his eyes, raised his eyes again, and with the laughter falling in his mouth, a vast soul force of terror swept out of Xiao Yang's eyebrows. Oh, let me have a try, too. How terrible is the power of the fighting emperor. Boom. The terrible soul power quickly condensed into a huge soul hammer in the void in front of Xiao Yang. With Xiao Yang's heart moving, the hammer also waved up and bombarded the 3 Lingtian characters of Galei Mountain with terror. At the same time, on those 3 characters, there was also a terrible threat of fighting the Emperor, which spread rapidly, and condensed a huge momentum and virtual shadow opposite Xiao Yang. When Xiao Yang's soul hammer blew out, the human shadow condensed by the Emperor's pressure was also a big sleeve in the palm behind him. With a wave of his palm, he blew over to the soul hammer. Boom! After an instant, Xiao Yang's soul hammer and the virtual shadow's palm blasted together. At that time, the terrible invisible wave swept rapidly, making the whole grey mountain shake at this moment, and the people below were even more shocked. After the blow, Xiao Yang's soul hammer dispersed. The figure also took back his palm. Xiao Yang's face changed slightly, but he didn't care. Instead, he gave a heroic laugh and said, "Ha ha ha. Okay. It's really worthy of the pressure left by the strong emperor. Let me have a good experience today. Come again." With the sound of laughter falling, Xiao Yang's heart moved, and the surging soul power swept again, and blasted the virtual shadow again. On the top of the mountain, Xiao Yang's hands were behind him and his eyes were closed. In the center of his eyebrows, the vast and terrible soul power poured out like the water of a surging river. It gathered over Xiao Yang's head and also turned into a virtual shadow of his soul the size of the virtual shadow opposite. When the people at the foot of Mount Gri saw this scene, they couldn't help feeling shocked. It seems that this mysterious strong man of unknown origin wants to challenge the power of the fighting emperor on Mount Gri. Drink! With a fierce drink, Xiao Yang's soul turned into a virtual shadow, and Ling Tian's momentum shook fiercely. He raised his palm and blasted it fiercely towards the Dudi virtual shadow opposite. The fierce breaking wind roared between heaven and earth with the palm wind. The invisible palm crossed the sky, and the void space was broken. The harsh sound explosion was heard all the time. This kind of power can be called terror. The invisible pressure is like a Mount Tai on everyone's shoulders. The power of terror is the same in the hearts of the semi-emperor strong below. Who on earth is this guy who dares to fight against the emperor's authority? Can we say that he is a 9-star-and-a-half emperor? But in the wild ancient city, Mu She is the only one who can have this strength. Several semi-emperor strong men stared at Xiao Yang on the top of the mountain with dignified eyes. They looked full of doubts, and their words contained a sense of horror. This sudden strong man really surprised them. While Xiao Yang's palm blew out, the opposite Dudi virtual shadow also blew out a palm and greeted Xiao Yang's palm. This palm seems ordinary, but at the moment of its explosion, the heavy thunder clouds over the Galei mountain turned up violently. Silver thunder and lightning fell from the sky like 10,000 thunder snakes, roaring constantly in this void and imposing. The terrible thunder fell from the sky, then quickly condensed on the palm of the virtual shadow, coiled around its whole arm, and gradually solidified the illusory arm. Xiao Yang was surprised when he saw this scene. He didn't expect that the emperor's authority was so powerful. With the authority of the emperor's strong body, he had forcibly attracted the thunder force between heaven and earth for its use, and this was just a virtual shadow. It's hard to imagine how earth-shaking it would be if he was here. Boom! The next moment, at the moment when the thunder gathered, the whole thunder arm was blasted with Xiao Yang's soul palm. Boom! At that time, the thunder burst, and the world was covered by terrible thunder. The thunder palm unexpectedly affected the thunder force in the thundercloud and carried out a violent and rainstorm-like terrorist bombardment on Xiao Yang. After the blow, Xiao Yang's soul palm was forcibly dispersed by the blow, and the face of Xiao Yang's body below also became pale, and a trace of blood flowed from his closed lips. Ha ha. Cool. The power of fighting the emperor and the strong is really extraordinary, but it's not enough. Come again. Although he was injured, Xiao Yang's heart was hot. His mind moved, and the virtual shadow of soul cohesion became solid again. Xiao Yang's hands with closed eyes were quickly raised to his chest. At the same time, the hands of soul virtual shadow were also raised synchronously, linked by 10 fingers, and printed formulas were quickly offered. At the next moment, the fighting spirit in Xiao Yang suddenly surged out, quickly gathered into the soul shadow overhead. Drink. Try this. Yellow Spring. Tianyu. With a sharp drink, Xiao Yang's soul virtual shadow suddenly shocked. The fighting spirit cooperated with the terrible soul power, and a loud bang came out like a heavy thunder, deafening. Mu. 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 Huangquan Tianyu was originally a fighting skill of heaven level. With Xiao Yang's current strength, his power is even more terrible. Coupled with the blessing of soul power, once it is exercised, even the semi-imperial strong men below have changed their faces one after another. They can only do their best to resist the terrorist power of Huangquan Tianyu. The sky anger of the yellow spring came out, and the virtual shadow of the fighting emperor opposite did not fall down at all. The palm stretched out, and the arm raised high above the head. It was almost inserted into the thunder cloud. Then, the 5 fingers of the virtual shadow spread out, and then held it tightly. While the space exploded, dazzling thunder rays also shot quickly, gathered in the palm of the virtual shadow, and finally condensed into a huge lightning light mass. Then the arm waved down suddenly, and the light mass also shot out with it, and blasted at Xiao Yang's virtual shadow. Huangquan Tianyu. Mu. 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 Xiao Yang didn't dare to be careless. His fighting spirit poured out madly. The yellow spring Tianyu did his best to spread out. Circles of invisible space waves turned into huge waves, which echoed between the heaven and the earth, making everyone below show a look of great pain. If it wasn't far away, I'm afraid it would be a residual threat, enough to kill them. At this time, some people who can barely support also hurriedly and forcibly prop up their bodies. Before the natural anger of the yellow spring has completely erupted, they quickly flee here, for fear that once it is late, they will be affected by the pond fish again. Unfortunately, although the yellow spring Tianyu is not weak, Xiao Yang is still weak under the pressure of the fighting emperor. After supporting for a moment, Xiao Yang's yellow spring Tianyu is broken, and the thunder and lightning light comes quickly to Xiao Yang with the remaining power. Ha ha. It's strong enough. If it's true, it's the power left by the strong emperor. But in the final analysis, you're just a power. Drink. Come again. Let me see how strong the power that can suppress the 9-star and half emperor can be. The voice fell, and the vast and terrible soul power in the center of Xiao Yang's eyebrows surged out again. Ling Tian's virtual shadow solidified for a few minutes, and his hands were together, so he collided with the Dudi virtual shadow again. Bang! 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 Although he is still not an opponent, Xiao Yang seems to have endless energy. In the bombardment again and again, he constantly stands up. No matter how terrible the shadow of fighting the emperor is, he can never completely defeat Xiao Yang. Xiao Yang is like a tumbler. No matter how hard you try, you can't knock him down unless you break him. Xiao Yang, however, is an unbreakable tumbler. The red sunset like blood dyed a large area of the sky, and the void at the end of the line of sight was a little dark. At the moment, within the scope of Galay Mountain, there was constant thunder, and the thunder light shone, shining the whole mountain all the time like day. Even the people at the foot of the mountain had no intention to identify the sky and time at this time. After hundreds of rounds of fierce collision, Xiao Yang's momentum has been significantly reduced. Looking at the virtual shadow of Do Di, although it has not been as thick as the original, it is almost difficult to see the change compared with Xiao Yang. On the top of the mountain, Xiao Yang gasped slightly in his mouth, and the blood at the corners of his mouth never dried up. In the face of the virtual shadow of fighting the emperor, although Xiao Yang could barely support it, he still had no room to fight back. But even so, at the moment, Xiao Yang is still excited. Although he is defeated, anyway, what he is facing at the moment is the pressure of a real emperor fighting strong man. Although his strength is less than 1%, it is also a kind of experience for Xiao Yang. The scarlet tongue licked his lips. For a long time, a fishy and sweet smell filled Xiao Yang's mouth, and the corners of Xiao Yang's mouth gradually aroused a hot and excited smile, which also added a little hostility to him. Drink. Come again. Towering hand. When the light group was coming, Xiao Yang made another startling drink with blood in the corners of his mouth. The soul beads in the sea shook sharply, and a surge of terrible soul power surged out rapidly. Under Xiao Yang's control, it condensed into a huge palm. Sky-level soul skill, towering hand. The towering palm containing the power of terrible soul condensed out. Xiao Yang didn't hesitate at all. His heart moved. The huge Lingtian palm, with the terror of crushing everything, roared again towards the virtual shadow of Dudi opposite. However, the shadow of the fighting emperor seemed to be used to it. The seal was sealed again, and the thunder roared. The terrible thunder quickly condensed on the void, and turned into a huge thunder dragon. With the terrible thunder howling, it fell from the sky and hit Xiao Yang's towering hand hard. Boom! With a loud roar, no accident, the thunder dragon dispersed, and the virtual shadow of Xiao Yang's soul dispersed with it. Xiao Yang's body below also fell to the ground with a plop. No matter how, in the face of the emperor's threat, he still had no chance of winning. He arched his hand at the virtual shadow condensed by the emperor's pressure. Xiao Yang finally relaxed and lay down. With Xiao Yang's relaxation, a deep sense of sleep quickly poured into his mind. The next day. When Xiao Yang woke up from a night's deep sleep and rubbed his still slightly dizzy head, Xiao Yang climbed up and found that he was just lying on the top of the cliff where he stood the day before, and at his feet was a 10,000-foot cliff. At the sight of this, Xiao Yang suddenly felt cold behind his back, and the muscles at the corners of his mouth could not help twitching slightly. He was glad that he didn't like to move when he slept. Fortunately, a large flat land was cut out on the top of the mountain. Otherwise, once he turned over when he slept, he really didn't know how to die. Wouldn't he really benefit from death? Of course, it's just that Xiao Yang thinks about it from his own independent point of view. After all, anyway, there are two guys in his body, Xiaojin and Guyo. Once something happens to him, they will naturally take care of him. Moreover, with Xiao Yang's strength now, if he really fell down, he could wake up immediately. How could he fall to death for no reason? After entertaining himself, Xiao Yang shrugged with a smile, then stretched his waist and felt the situation in his body. After finding that there was no abnormality, he stopped staying, moved his body and quickly flew away in the direction of the wild ancient city. Today's wild ancient city is much more lively than in the past few months. Early in the morning, the streets in the city are already crowded with people. Moreover, especially in the north of the city, the situation is even more serious. Because today, Master Mu wants to kill in the north of the city in front of everyone in the wild ancient city and kill a 9-star-and-a-half emperor in public. Although Mu She is one of the barbarian double tyrants, he spends most of his time in cultivation because he is in seclusion on weekdays, and rarely goes out on weekdays. Therefore, there are few people who can recognize Mu Han at the first sight in such a large barbarian ancient city. As a third-order array mage, it adds a lot of weight to Mu Han's identity. The whole wilderness, there are countless people who want to see Mu She. Today, Master Mu wants to kill a 9-star-and-a-half emperor, which is enough to attract most people from the wild ancient city to watch. Moreover, the most important thing is that what Mu She wants to kill this time is the real 9-star-and-a-half emperor. The strong at that level, in this wild ancient city, apart from Union Pavilion and Luo Lao, they only admire the teacher. Now they can have the opportunity to meet other 9-star-and-a-half emperors. Even a dying man can arouse the curiosity of these people. Joining in the fun is an easy job that everyone will not dislike, because for them, doing so can not only make them feel happy and feast their eyes, but most importantly, it doesn't need to pay a price, at least, in general, it is. Today, it is the same. While the area in the north of the city became more and more lively, a black-robed figure quickly swept into the wild ancient city with a lightning speed of terror. Huh! When Xiao Yang just entered the wild ancient city, Luo Lao and Qingmu, who were sitting at the green stone table drinking tea in the spirit world, were fierce eyebrows and showed a look of surprise on the old face. They looked up together and turned their eyes to the direction of Xiao Yang in the wild ancient city. Then, after a few breaths, the two old men slowly took back their eyes. The two looked at each other with a shocked look in their eyes. After a long time, Luo felt relaxed and breathed out a long breath. He smiled at Qingmu with the same relaxed look on his face and said, "The boy is back at last." Aoki frowned and smiled, and sighed with ridicule. "Yes, the boy is back at last. If he doesn't come back, I'm afraid it's the old man. I'm not sure whether he's really alive. At that time, I'm afraid you old man should count all the sins on the old man. Hey, it's not just me. Compared with me, the little guy in my family has a better temper, but he's no better than his grandfather." At this point, the two old men looked at each other with their eyes and smiled bitterly, even if they stopped talking. At the same time, Xiao Yang has also come to the outside of Union Pavilion. When he came to the cloud-hidden pavilion again, Xiao Yang didn't intuitively feel that things are right and people are wrong. He didn't know whether Luo Jin was still in the cloud-hidden pavilion in the past 2 years. Maybe he had left. Xiao Yang thought in his heart that there was a little tension at the bottom of his heart, but he was pressed down by him. He hesitated a little and fell from the sky. Until this time, Xiao Yang noticed that the door of Union Pavilion was closed. It seemed that it meant to close the door and thank the guests. It was clear that there was no business today. Xiao Yang frowned slightly. He had some doubts in his heart. After a moment of hesitation, he strode forward. In the sneering eyes of the people in the street behind him, he raised his hands and pushed open the door of the cloud-hidden pavilion. With a big step, he had stepped into it. "Hey, this smelly boy, don't you see that Union Pavilion is closed and doesn't do business? He dares to break in. Aren't you afraid to provoke Shen Lao and kick him out?" Seeing that Xiao Yang had entered the cloud-hidden pavilion with 1 foot, many people immediately stopped to watch with a sneer behind Xiao Yang. Obviously, They were also trying to see the embarrassed look on Xiao Yang's face when he was driven out by Shen Lao. However, Xiao Yang paid no attention to this. When he stepped into the door, there was also a slightly impatient old voice in the hall on the first floor of Union Pavilion. "Don't you know that I don't do business in Union Pavilion today? Please leave. If you want to buy something, come back tomorrow." Hearing the familiar voice, Xiao Yang smiled warmly. His palm on the door pushed the two doors open. At the same time, the other foot left outside the door also lifted up and stepped into the cloud-hidden pavilion. "Oh, sorry, I'm not here to buy things today. I'm looking for someone." When the voice in Xiao Yang's mouth came out, the Shenlao who was sorting things with Xiao Yang's back in the Union Pavilion hall was stunned when he heard the familiar voice. Then when he turned slowly and saw Xiao Yang, the expression on an old face finally became shocked in an instant. Rock Owl, you're really not dead." Hearing Xuanlao's shocked words, Xiao Yang couldn't help warming his heart. Then he showed a warm smile on his face and said with a smile, "Thanks to old Shen and everyone's concern, I Rock Owl can't die so easily." As Xiao Yang's voice fell, old Shen also came to Xiao Yang. An excited surprise smile appeared on his face. A pair of dry palms held Xiao Yang's palms hard, as if to test whether Xiao Yang was just a dream, but then, old Shen's old eyes quickly turned red and his voice trembled with a smile. Good. As long as you haven't died. Do you know that I and the pavilion leader have been worried about your life and death all the time in the past 2 years when you were told to die? If the leader of Qingmu clan hadn't insisted all the time, I'm afraid the young lord would have been tempted to send someone to kill Mu Han." Xiao Yang also smiled with gratitude when he heard the speech. He also knew that Luo Jin didn't have to talk much about his friendship between men. Just one thing was enough to bring the relationship between the two people closer. Now Xiao Yang and Luo Jin are just like this. Haha, well, I won't say more. I'd better go up first. In order to wait for this day, I've been waiting for 2 years. The voice fell, and Xiao Yang was not hypocritical. With Shen Laro suddenly becoming fast, he walked quickly towards the 6th floor of Union Pavilion. At this moment, outside the Union Pavilion, those passers-by who saw Xiao Yang walk into the Union Pavilion with their own eyes and wanted to wait to see him eat. At this moment, they were shocked to see that Xiao Yang has no return, just like the appearance of successfully entering the Union Pavilion. I thought I could enter the cloud-hidden pavilion, but when one of them approached the still-open door of the cloud-hidden pavilion, the good Nanmu door suddenly made a violent and heavy bang. Then the person who wanted to enter the cloud-hidden pavilion could only sit and shut the door. Wild Ancient City, Cloud-Hidden Pavilion. What? Mu Han, the old ghost, wants to kill Zhongli in public. On the 6th floor of Union Pavilion, Xiao Yang's body, which was originally sitting on a chair, suddenly stood up. In a pair of dark eyes full of ancient at the moment, he was angry. If Mu Han wants to deal with others, Xiao Yang can ignore it, but if he wants to deal with Zhongli, Xiao Yang can't stand idly by. Not for anything else, just because 2 years ago, Zhongli once shot for him and traded his serious injury for Xiao Yang today. Although Xiao Yang is not a kind person who can help all living beings, he is definitely not an ungrateful person. He doesn't save his benefactor at the sight of death. Xiao Yang can't do such a thing. Although Zhongli had a purpose for him, he had to save Zhongli anyway. Where is he now? I'll find him. Xiao Yang's eyes were extremely cold, forced down his anger, and asked Luo Jin in a low tone. At this moment, sitting opposite Xiao Yang, is Luo Jin, the leader of Union Pavilion. After 2 years, earth-shaking changes have taken place in Luo Jin. Under Xiao Yang's terror perception, Luo Jin's strength is even more terrible than his achievements of hard cultivation in the past 2 years. Now Luo Jin is a real 8-star and a half-emperor strong man. 2 years ago, his strength was only the later stage of 4-star and a half-emperor. He was promoted to 4 levels in 2 years, which has doubled compared with Xiao Yang. However, Xiao Yang doesn't want to pay attention to these at the moment. Now he just wants to find Mu Han immediately. He wants to see how Mu Han, who was able to be majestic in front of him 2 years ago, can continue his style. Brother Yang Xiao, you don't have to worry too much about this. President Jiu Li and President Red Phosphorus of the Herbalist Association have rushed over after hearing the news. We'll go together later. If Mu Han is still stubborn and wants to kill Zhongli, I'll reveal the identity of the leader of Union Pavilion. At that time, he doesn't dare to do anything. Seeing Xiao Yang's angry appearance, Luo Jin was also slightly surprised. He didn't expect that Xiao Yang didn't hesitate to provoke the Mu Han for the sake of a Zhongli who had only helped him once. But at the same time, Luo Jin was also pleased. Xiao Yang was so kind that he could help him with all his strength. Sometimes, the person worthy of your help is not necessarily the kind of person with terrible growth potential, or maybe it is a weak person who really has benevolence, but what makes Luo Jin more gratified is that Xiao Yang has both. However, seeing Xiao Yang's impulsive appearance at the moment, Luo Jin was more worried. After all, the gap between them was still too big in the face of Mu Han with their strength. You don't have to show up. Just tell me where the dog thief Mu Han is. I'll see how he killed Zhongli today. Seeing Xiao Yang's persistent look, Luo Jin frowned and looked at the Shenlaro standing beside him. They both frowned and thought. Then Luo Jin nodded helplessly and said, "Well, let's go first. I'll come forward if necessary." Xiao Yang nodded. The look on his face finally eased down, but there was still a raging anger burning in the dark eyes. Wild ancient city, north of the city. On such a large square, crowded crowds gathered around the periphery of the square and the surrounding buildings. Wherever they could stand, they were occupied by strong people of all kinds of strength. The noise echoed over the square like thunder. So many people gathered in one place. This scene only appeared a few times in the wild ancient city, but today, it gathered again outside the huge manor. Everyone looked at the two closed gates directly opposite the square. On the flat above the gate, the word Mu Zhuang was engraved with the word Mu Zhuang. The Majesty sent out invisibly announced to everyone that this is Mu Han's territory. Although the door has not been opened, and the people or scenes that people want to see have not appeared, none of them dare to complain. After all, this is the territory of Mu Zhuang and Mu She, which is the Grand Nine-Star and Half-Emperor. How can he be blamed for his work? Creak. I don't know how long later, in the midst of a creak, the heavy door was finally opened slowly. The first to come out was 4 guards of Mu Zhuang. At this moment, they were surrounded by countless eyes. Although they were a little scared, as guards of Mu Zhuang, their faces showed more, but a touch of pride. Then, a strong old figure stepped out slowly from the open door. With his steps, a sound of gold and iron chain sliding came out. Wow dash! When Mu Han stepped out of the door, the people around the square cheered as soon as they saw Mu Han. Mu Han seemed unheard of this and continued to stride towards the center of the square. Until this time, people found that under his sleeve robe, there was a huge golden chain engraved with mysterious array symbols. The chain was very long. They didn't enter the gate. They couldn't see what the other end of the chain was, but they could hear a very heavy drag. When Mu Han came to the center of the square, the palm holding the chain under his sleeve robe pulled fiercely, and the terrible force spread rapidly along the huge chain. Everyone only heard a violent breaking wind. In his sight, a golden cube cage was pulled out. With a roar, the cage with a length of 10 feet and a width fell on the bluestone slab not far from Mu Han's body. The hard bluestone slab was rolled into a pile of lime in an instant. With the strong wind sweeping around the cage, a thick dust fog was raised. When the dust and fog dispersed, the things in it just fell into the eyes of the people present. Immediately, they couldn't help but tighten their bodies, and a chill slowly arose from the bottom of their hearts. Only in the cage, at this moment, there is a figure who is covered with blood and can't see his face. This person is Zhongli. On Zhongli's body, at the moment, there are several chains engraved with mysterious array symbols, which pass through his limbs, 2 peeper bones and 2 thighs respectively. He is dripping with blood. At the moment, there are drops of blood flowing out of it, which dyed the ground below, which has been shocked into powder. This scene is terrible. This video will end here.